So, today I want to talk about what is probably the most divisive issue in this country and probably every Western country on earth, which is immigration. And I want to talk a little bit about the underlying politics behind immigration, not so much the surface level arguments that we already know about, which is should we have open borders? Should we clamp down on the border? Should we deport the DACA people, or should we give them amnesty or a path to citizenship? Uh, I believe we already understand these arguments for the most part. I'll break them down quickly, but I'm not going to try to spend too much time on them. Essentially, the left on the surface level comes with an argument from the point of humanitarianism. And they say, these are human beings, they deserve dignity, they deserve respect. Um, we're responsible for a lot of the instability in Latin America, so we have somewhat of a moral imperative to help some of these people. And on top of that, we have an abundance of resources in this country and we can afford to help them, so we should do so. And they also make an argument from economics saying, hey, it benefits our economy in the long run to have these people come into the country. And they make, I think, some disingenuous arguments sometimes about how immigrants do the jobs that Americans don't want to do, which, as a working class person, I can tell you is not entirely true. I mean, they do agricultural jobs that Americans don't want to do, but most immigrants aren't in the agricultural field. And besides that, any other of those sectors you go into, construction, factory jobs, retail jobs, any of these low-wage jobs, there are Americans working side by side with immigrants, and we're competing with them, frankly. I'm not saying that's a reason to keep them out, but that's one of the things that they say. But anyway, on the right, they're more, let's say, hard-ass. They're more strict about it. They say, they're worried about people taxing resources. They're worried about people bringing crime. They're worried about people bringing poverty and gang cultures and things of this nature. And they're worried about demographic change and cultural change and all of these things. People not speaking English, yada, yada, yada. It's some of those concerns are rooted in a valid place, but taken to too far of an extreme, they just become irrational xenophobia. So I think we all understand the basic, dynamic between these two basic arguments. So I want to try to talk a little bit about the underlying dynamics behind the immigration debate, which is the strategic element that's at play that I believe both sides must be aware of. I can't imagine how they're not aware of this. Sometimes they hint at it, but neither side really ever explicitly points it out and talks about it as the focus of why they need to be for or against immigration. And so the strategic element is basically the Democratic Party benefits from importing as many Latin American people into this country as they can, because they see this as potential Democratic voters in the future, because largely people who are considered minorities skew to the left in terms of their voting patterns, Hispanics and black people, but obviously it's more Hispanics that are being brought into this country. And so they see this as like this is going to be the way that you turn a state like Texas purple, or a state like Florida from purple to blue. So, there's that. And the flip side of this is the Republicans obviously see this coming, and this is why immigration is such a top tier issue for them, even though it almost seems irrational. Like, I remember NPR back in like 2012 talking about, like, how is the Republican Party going to deal with the changing demographics in the country? Aren't they eventually going to have to start trying to cater to the Hispanic vote instead of catering to the white people who are scared of Hispanics invading the country vote? And I believe that this is largely the last ditch effort to try to prevent this trend of white people becoming the minority in this country from becoming the long-term trend. I mean, like, I said that wrong. Like, basically, we're on a trend towards white people becoming the minority. They don't want that to happen. They want to stop it before it happens, before it's too late. And so I see Trump as sort of a Hail Mary pass in that regard. They're 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 trying this last, radical rallying cry to their base and the people who support them, and they're hoping that they can muster up enough support to somehow reverse the trends of immigration or reverse the demographic trends enough so that they don't become irrelevant due to demographics. And I can't help but think that this whole thing is sort of intentional rather than just sort of circumstance. Like, the Democrats will talk about it at times. Like, people on the left will talk about this trend at times, but they talk about it as a sort of inevitability. They talk about it like the browning of America, like it's just this force of nature that's just going to happen one way or the other. They don't, which to a certain extent, there are forces that are outside our control that are, you know, that are influencing this, such as the disparity of wealth between America and their Latin American neighbors. But at the same time, they ignore their active role in this, which is that they're basically endorsing this trend, and that they actually changed the immigration laws in 1965 specifically. They used to be kind of racist immigration laws that were preferential towards white immigrants, which I agree should have been changed, but I believe there was also a strategic element to this where they saw the racial the civil rights movement and all of this fight towards racial equality happening in the 60s, and they saw the momentum in this and sort of latched onto that in order to expand it into the realm of immigration, because they saw I have to imagine, I could be wrong, but I have to imagine they saw the potential strategic benefit in changing the demographics in this country towards their favor. And so, the part about it that's sort of dishonest is that at the time they argued to the American people, because keep in mind this is the 1960s, people were a lot more racist than they are now. This was a more majority white country than it is now, and they told people, no, this isn't going to radically change the demographics in this country, this law. No, it's just going to change. In principle, we're going to be more fair. We're not going to discriminate, but it's not going to radically change. It's still going to be a white country. We're not going to radically change. That's what they told people. In essence, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But you can look it up. That's essentially what they argued. And obviously that's not true. Obviously it's the opposite. Obviously the demographics are radically changing as a result, in part, of their policy. And not only their policy, but they're also just sort of embracing the fact that people are coming up from Latin America, and they're saying, hey, let these people stay. They serve a vital part of the economy, and let's make it easier for these people to come. I believe that there is a humanitarian aspect to this. I believe that they do also see this as a positive thing for these people. But I can't, for the life of me, neglect the thought in my mind that they also understand the strategic importance of this, and so do the Republicans. I think that the Republicans would be much quicker to jump ship on this whole immigration issue if they saw it as a losing issue, if they didn't see it as an existential crisis. And I believe they see it as an existential crisis because they've sort of latched themselves onto this image of protecting white America and sort of the vanguard that's going to conserve the sort of identity of America. And so I believe, once again, that Trump and this recent rise in the far right and nationalist and populist movements, which sort of caught me off guard, to be honest with you. I believe that's like a last-ditch effort to try to, save themselves on that issue, because they see the writing on the wall that eventually the numbers are going to make that an unviable strategy, and they're not going to be able to outcompete the Democrats in terms of, pandering towards the special interest groups that serve specific minority communities, because the Democrats have already established a long brand in doing this, and the Republicans have established the opposite brand in doing this. So, the one thing I will say, because it sounds almost like we're inevitably ending or heading towards a one-party state, or a state where the Republican Party inevitably has to either radically change themselves or another party has to replace them. The one thing I can say is that after all of this takes place, and I believe it will take place, I believe that this country is headed towards demographic change, and I don't oppose it personally, because I see that really there is a lot of potential for growth in this country. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of land, there's a lot of space. We're a low density population on average as a country of this size. We have a massive economy. It can be much bigger. I believe that there's a lot of potential. I just believe the rate at which we import people has to be reasonable. We can't take the tactics of some of the European countries that just embraced mass immigration, sort of to the detriment of their own native populations, because that can cause cultural conflict, ethnic conflict, economic conflict. It can cause all sorts of things. But I believe as long as the rate is gradual enough, yes, we can expand. The demographics can change. We don't have to be a majority white country. That's not necessary at all to our national identity. But I also think that eventually, once that happens, once we go past the Rubicon and the Democrats have, secured the fact that there aren't enough old WASP, type Republicans to vote against them based on identity politics, I believe the dynamics are going to shift probably in the politics, because when you look at a lot of these minority communities, particularly Latin Americans and African Americans and Asian Americans, frankly, a lot of them are very conservative, socially speaking. Like, they hold a lot of very conservative beliefs. They're very religious. They're very traditionally oriented. They're not as nearly as open as liberal, sort of academic, erudite white people are towards, all of the, the new trends and the things that you're supposed to support, like LGBT and things of that nature. They're behind on all of that shit. They're about on par with right-wing white Americans, to be honest with you, with regard to all of that shit. And I believe that once it no longer becomes a matter of there's one party that's perceived as racist and trying to be a vanguard of the old, white order, and another party that's saying, hey, yeah, we're for everybody. Once that dynamic breaks off and, both parties basically say, hey, yeah, we're for everybody, but we have different beliefs on what's best for everybody, then I think they're actually going to have to start competing more on these questions of value. Because let's be honest, a lot of people, they care about their finances, but they don't have a detailed understanding of economic policy, and they don't consistently vote in their economic best interest. They're much more motivated by these sort of social issues and social causes, and their values, what their core values and their identity that reflects their values, what that says about them. So I believe that there will be eventually a new angle for the right wing to move into these other demographics, but it's going to be after they realize that the current strategy of trying to clamp down on the borders and stop this demographic change, after they realize that's a failing strategy, eventually they'll cope, they'll adapt, and they'll adopt a new strategy that really starts actively trying to recruit those people. Right now, they're trying to superficially recruit those people through, virtue signaling and identity politics, and just, oh yeah, we nominated a Spanish guy, we nominated a black guy, we nominated a woman over here, and their primaries are very diverse, but not nominated, I guess, but we're running all these different candidates. Look how diverse we are. They're adopting the image, but so far they haven't adopted the key political issues that's going to no longer alienate them from these specific minority communities that they have such a hard time recruiting from. I think this will change over time. I believe it will. But as of right now, this is the strategy, I believe. On the left, no doubt about it. This is the strategy. They want these immigrants not only because they care about them, not only because they believe they'll make a better life for them, because they see a strategic advantage in it. The Republicans are deathly afraid of these immigrants, not just because they believe they're going to bring crime and they're going to bring this and that, but because they believe they're going to come in, they're going to become citizens, and they're going to vote them out of office. So yeah, that's basically it.